Hey, good afternoon to you. 406 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Brendan Carr, FCC Commissioner, will be with us at 4:30. We'll talk to him about the FCC's decision to let George Soros and friends take over 200-plus radio stations in the United States of America just ahead of the election. That's wonderful. Gabriel Noronha talks to us at 5 o'clock about Iran's latest attack on Israel today. And then David Strom from Hot Air at 5:30 gives us a preview of tonight's vice presidential debate. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Tim Walz, one of the contenders tonight on that stage, one of the combatants. He has claimed through the years that he is very, very close to China. Very close to China. He's said in the past that he's visited China some 30 times. Loves China. But that detail is getting some new scrutiny. Listen to Tim Walz. This is him in the past.
I lived in China, and as I said, I've been there about 30 times, but if someone tells you they're an expert on China, they're probably not telling you the truth because it's a complex country. But it's critically important for us. I don't fall into the category that China necessarily needs to be an adversarial relationship.
Yeah, 30 times he claimed. All of a sudden, though, his campaign is beginning to admit that's not true. In fact, it was about half as much. Walz went on around 15 trips to China in the 1990s and the early 2000s. The Free Beacon reporting on it here. Minnesota Public Radio's report says that Walz, quote, sometimes exaggerated his already substantial experience in China. Why would you err on that side? You know, if you were going to make it up, wouldn't you be like, I went to China a couple of times, right? If you were going to make it. But instead he was like, I went to China 30 times. He doubled the number. He really wanted to impress you about his connections to the commies. For more on this, I want to bring in Philip Lenczycki now, an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation, China expert himself. Philip, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. So Tim Walz, we're now finding out by his own admission, he lied to us about how frequently he visited China. Why would he do that?
Well, I think I'm just about as surprised as anyone else that Walz wasn't telling the truth on something. His background at this point is, very, 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 very hard to understand given all the deception or exaggeration that we've now heard. But just as you said, sort of rounding down from 30 to 15 really leaves us with, a very strange picture of this fellow who has sort of made it, a central piece of the sale that he is, as you just, showed, a China expert, that he is, fluent in Chinese and whatnot. If this isn't the case, then what are we supposed to think of this guy?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And by the way, one of the other pieces here is, I think I've talked about this with you before, the campaign has really downplayed all of his prior bragging about China in the first place. They barely mention it now. Tim Walz is just kind of the goofy guy who appears on stage and waves his arms around like Chris Farley, and then he disappears. And other than that, he really doesn't have any sort of ideological presence in this race. They're not even really emphasizing his commitment to China. Another piece here that we found out, courtesy of the Washington Free Beacon in just the last 24 hours, is that Walz has also lied about the fact that he claimed he was in Hong Kong in May of 1989 during the Tiananmen Square massacre. Here is Tim Walz making that claim back in 2014.
As a young man, I was just going to teach high school in Fosan in Guangdong, and was in Hong Kong in May of '89. And as the events were unfolding, several of us went in, and I still remember the train station in Hong Kong. It was a large number, especially European, I think, very angry that we would still go after what had happened. But it was my belief at that time that the diplomacy was going to happen on many levels, certainly people to people, and the opportunity to be in a Chinese high school at that critical time seemed to me to be really important.
The Washington Free Beacon discovering, by way of contemporaneous news accounts, that Tim Walz was actually not in Hong Kong at the time. He was here in the United States, and instead would be there later in the year, around August timeframe. What do you make of this?
I mean, I can't believe he didn't say he didn't, take incoming fire or something like that. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me why he would lie about that. We know that, this is a very important, day for him. Apparently he was, married on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. So it's unclear to me why he would lie about where he was at that point. It's really kind of hard to pin down, really frankly, where he was at any point in this past. Yeah.
He claimed to be there specifically on the date, June 4th, 1989. He said previously, quote, in a 2019 radio interview, he claimed he was there. Here is, let me see if I can play this for you. This is audio of Tim Walz making that claim.
When did you live in China?
Late 80s.
Okay.
So, I was there. I see this happening in Hong Kong as a more serious note. I was in Hong Kong on June 4th, 1989, when, of course, Tiananmen Square happened. And I was in China after that. It was very strange because, of course, all outside transmissions were blocked, Voice of America, and, of course, there was no phones or email or anything. So I was kind of out of touch. It took me a month to know the Berlin Wall had fallen when I was living there.
He said that on the Chad Hartman show. So as it stands now, Philip Lenczycki, he's just lying about all of this.
I think so. That's what it seems like. The question is, why? Why was he telling these exaggerations? I'm not quite sure. One might think that he was, simply trying to, sort of make himself look like he was more familiar with the country than he actually was. Uh-huh. Or there's also a concern that, no, in fact, this is just another lie. He actually might have really gone to China 30 times or more. And it is just that 15 of those times he no longer wishes to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to China and Tim Walz's connections, James Comer and the Oversight Committee released some information yesterday saying that they have an indication from whistleblowers within the Biden administration that DHS, the federal government, has some pretty extensive information about Tim Walz's connections to various Chinese interests. What, if anything, do you infer from that? Especially, this guy's a governor, so we've seen some evidence that the Chinese have very much tried to infiltrate the offices of what looks like typically Democrat governors. How are you reading this, Philip?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Comer's office, or the House Oversight Committee, they subpoenaed the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, and they're requesting some intelligence reports because they say that they've received whistleblower disclosures, and they had, through that, heard of some type of non-classified Microsoft Teams group chat. Now, this group chat was called Nation State Threat National Functional Team Biweekly Sync. And I think that is really the most, revealing part of what we learned yesterday. The name of that group chat, again, Nation State Threat National Functional Team. So originally, when Comer wrote this letter, he had just given the acronyms NST, NFT, but later the Hill reported that they'd heard from his office, or from him rather, that it was this Nation State Threat National Functional Team. So, from that, I would take it to mean that this was some type of meeting that some in DHS have regarding threats coming from nation states such as China. For your name to be brought up in that meeting, that would be quite concerning, I would think. But really, we're kind of waiting around to find out what all might have been said in that and in other classified and unclassified documents that apparently DHS has.
So, but going back to the idea that China is trying to get close to, especially these Democrat politicians, we've seen some patterns of in this way. Whether it's Senator Dianne Feinstein and her Chinese spy driver who's with her, Eric Swalwell and his sexual relationship with Fang Fang, or in the case of New York politicians, just new revelations recently that these New York Democrats had very close relationships with what appear to be Chinese assets. This would be consistent, right, if Tim Walz had somebody around him or he himself was involved in some sort of Chinese influence operation.
Right. And so the one concern that we, can imagine, but we haven't yet actually seen hard evidence about, is that given that he, is a governor, there has been a lot of reporting in the past about an organization called the Chinese People's Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. And they are responsible, they serve a Chinese intelligence service and have held a number of different type of events, specifically a governor's forum. And so that's something that Walz might have in the past participated in and or have been approached about. That's something that deserves additional scrutiny, I think. Additionally, as you just mentioned, what we've seen is that there's a lot of politicians on both the left and the right, seemingly more on the left, that have benefited from the financial contributions as well as sort of get out the vote effort from their local Chinese constituents who, unfortunately, it appears are at times sort of being led in a certain direction by individuals working for the aforementioned Chinese intelligence service. And so what we found specifically on Walz related to this was that, yes, in fact, in 2022, individuals associated with this Chinese intelligence service called the United Front Work Department did in fact hold a fundraiser for Walz. There's a number of other interactions that they had as well. So that could be another avenue by which they could have, conducted some type of elite capture on him.
Well, this is all good information ahead of tonight's debate. People will be able to hear it live right here at 9 o'clock on WMAL. Philip Lenczycki, thank you very much, reporter with the Daily Caller News Foundation. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks, Vince.
That's Philip. All right, coming up, more on this debate, what to expect tonight. The expectations game's already being played. The left is, you see all these reports I mentioned to you yesterday that Tim Walz is nervous. He doesn't want to let Kamala down. Please, this is so stupid. He's a bad debater, or I think what's the phrase? The CNN conservative, he no speak words good. Yeah, I'm going to play some expectations game audio coming up. I'd like to, but I want to first focus on what's going on with. There's a guy who calls himself Charlamagne Tha God. He's a host on a radio show called The Breakfast Club. You've seen a lot of his clips, probably. His real name is Leonard. Did you know that? Isn't Charlamagne? His name's Leonard. So Leonard yesterday was really stunned by President Trump's campaign ads from over the weekend. He saw one of these ads during a football game, and he said, wow, I didn't know that about Kamala. Take a listen to this.
I'll tell you what, that ad they was running during the football games this weekend claiming the vice president supports funding gender transition surgeries for all prison inmates and migrants in the U.S., that was nuts. I don't know if it was.
I wouldn't say nuts, but that was crazy.
That was funny.
I don't know if it was the backdrop of football. But when you hear the narrator say Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners, that one line, I was like, hell no, I don't want my taxpayer dollars going to that.
I definitely see that. She did
that ad was effective.
Kamala took a picture with a transgender. And it was this what they were saying, that it made it seem like Kamala supports transgender sex changes in jail with our money. That's what it came across.
Yeah, isn't that what they're saying?
It literally said that Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes.
Say it again.
And it talks about how she supports funding gender transition surgeries for all prison inmates and migrants in the United States. That ad was impactful.
That was impactful, he said. Now, let me add to the pile today. Congressman Byron Donalds just went on their show today, and he was explaining that Kamala is responsible for inflation. And they were like, no, that's not true. He goes, yes, it is. Take a listen.
I would argue we're not really thriving right now. This inflation, which, by the way, was brought to us by Kamala Harris, has really slowed down people from being able to excel.
By Kamala?
Yes.
The vice president.
Charlamagne.
It's still the president.
Charlamagne, listen, man. When Joe Biden wanted to do his American Rescue Plan, Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote in the United States Senate.
True.
She broke the tie that started this inflation that has hurt so many people in our country. Everybody listening to your show. It's not true?
First of all, it's a tie-breaking vote.
You sure you want to go there?
Go outside, Congressman, when you go outside.
You sure you want to go there? Okay, let's go there.
You had it
You got notes. You got notes, Angela, right?
That's fine. I have notes too.
I'm gonna give it to Charlamagne.
The biggest note I have today
I'm gonna give it to Charlamagne.
is that on every question I've asked,
because Angela, hold on now.
For every infrastructure project in your community,
you can go to
should go out and thank
portion.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Congress that voted for the American Rescue Plan.
Angela,
that's what should be happening.
Larry Summers wrote an op-ed back in 2021. Larry Summers was the Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton. He was an economic advisor to Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. He said that the American Rescue Plan that Joe Biden wanted, that Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote in the United States Senate, would create a massive inflation that we have not seen in a generation. Well, guess what? Larry Summers was correct. You know who also was correct, Angela? I was, because I was in the Budget Committee when they brought the bill. And I said in that committee, it's going to cause massive inflation. That's what happened. So the problem we have in our economy today is that prices have gone up massively. Wages adjusted for inflation is down. People's pocketbooks are hurting.
Okay, so Byron Donalds slowly walks everybody through this. I want you to understand something. Kamala Harris is not merely just a vice president who's sitting there doing nothing. She's the vice president who made it worse. She's the vice president who cast the tie-breaking vote. She's the one who drove up inflation. And I've told you so many times, there was a moment where Biden admitted all of this back at the Port of Baltimore a couple years back, which, by the way, is now shut down thanks to Biden just absolutely screwing that up. But Biden admitted that he caused inflation. He admitted this. Take a listen.
It can delay shipment of furniture or clothing, reduce worldwide supply, and driving up prices here in America. And the irony is people have more money now because of the first major piece of legislation.
The American Rescue Plan, the one that Kamala was the tie-breaking vote on.
You all got checks for $1,400. You got checks for a whole range of things. If you're a mom and you have kids under the age of 7, you're getting $300 a month. And if it's over 7 to 17, you're getting $360.
That's a lot of money.
Like wealthy people used to do when they get back tax returns.
But then what happens?
To change people's lives. But what happens if there's nothing to buy, you got more money, you compete for getting it there, it creates a real problem.
It creates a real problem. Even Joe Biden knew it at one point, and his brain barely works. It's 4:29. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, Gabriel Naronha talks to us at 5 o'clock about the breaking news today of another massive Iranian missile attack on Israel. Where does it go from here? Gabriel will help us out with that. And then at 5:30, with a preview of tonight's debate between the vice presidential candidates, David Strom will join us. You can hear that debate live on WMAL beginning at 9 p.m. this evening. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. George Soros has been making all sorts of moves to acquire radio stations all across the United States of America. Over the past few years, we've been covering his effort to obtain Latino radio stations, Hispanic radio stations, doing it, dozens of them, in order to, obviously take over the airwaves there. And additionally, now this week, we get FCC approval for a George Soros-led effort to take over some 200-plus radio stations all across the United States of America. And it's being done in a very expedited fashion by the FCC. And that's another way of saying it's usually not done this quickly. For more on what exactly happened and is happening, I want to bring in an FCC commissioner now. Brendan Carr joins us. Brendan, great to have you back with us, sir.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks.
Okay, so let's just set up the basics here. This is about acquiring this company, Odyssey, and all the radio stations that it owns. What can you tell us? How did this all go down?
Well, look, earlier this year, this Soros-backed entity made a move to buy over 200 radio stations across more than 40 markets or cities across the country. And when they did that, they said that they were bringing in foreign investment, so money from companies based abroad or individuals abroad. The FCC has rules on the books. When you're bringing in foreign investment, you need to run through a special process that involves various national security reviews, foreign policy reviews. And what they did here was they asked to skip that process so they could more quickly get control and ownership of these stations. And then they say they'll come back down the road to run that process. But the commission itself has never voted to do this before. We've never allowed somebody to sort of put the cart before the horse and get control of the stations before you run that national security review.
And the control of these stations, is it immediate? Are we looking at George Soros and company having control over the stations in the lead up to the election now?
Yeah, this should be done effective immediately. The stations are coming out of bankruptcy, so there may be some minor filings you have to do in the bankruptcy court, but for all intents and purposes, it happens now, and you can start changing the programming at stations as soon as you have ownership of them. And there's a lot of just regular, news and information on here, but there's a handful at least of stations that are currently have conservative commentators on it, from Sean Hannity to Mark Levin, and now this Soros-backed group will have free range to change those or not as they see fit.
As you understand it, Brendan Carr, what are the foreign interests who are involved here?
Well, that's what's so interesting is they haven't disclosed it at all. All they've said is they'll have excessive foreign ownership, meaning more than 25%, but they haven't said whether it's 90% or 100% or 26%. They've given the FCC no clue at all as to where those foreign interest holders are. What they've said is, trust us, we will wall them off, whoever they are, until the FCC does eventually complete this national security review. But right now we're signing off without any of that. In fact, there's lots of deals that people have tried to get through the FCC over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's just been tough sledding. A lot of them have been turned aside. It's been a real difficult process. As you know, this administration is not very friendly to deals as a general matter right now. But yet this one just slipped on by without much process at all.
So I think it's helpful for people to understand how the FCC is composed. There are 5 FCC commissioners, 3 of them appointed by Democrats, 2 by Republicans. You're one of those. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. The FCC is a 5-member body. 3 are Democrats right now, 2 are Republicans. So I've been on a handful of losing ends of partisan votes, and that's what this one was. This was 3 Democrats in favor, 2 Republicans in opposition to this particular deal. Now, the good news, such as it is, again, this entity will have to go through this national security process eventually. And so there'll be another bite at the apple at the FCC, but it'll be very difficult to unwind this transaction once it's fully consummated here.
The bad news is that review will likely not take place until after this election is already concluded. And now with a little over 30 days until that election, we'll see what happens, whether or not it's actually concluded. But Election Day is just over 30 days away. This decision is giving George Soros and whatever mysterious foreign interest is involved here a chance at having a hand in American politics immediately.
Yeah, that's right. They won't even need to come back to the FCC for at least 30 days. And then that national security review usually takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So they will be fully in control of these stations, but there will be no national security review before the election takes place.
It's just madness. So one of the reasons, if I just want to emphasize this, one of the reasons you would expect the FCC to be involved in something like this, specifically with foreign ownership, is because I presume you're trying to stop adversaries from taking over American airwaves, because the broadcast airwaves are regulated by the people of the United States by way of the FCC. You're trying to stop foreign meddling on those airwaves. Is that right?
Yeah, it used to be that we basically had a de facto rule that you couldn't ever go above 25% due to those national security concerns that you talked about. Again, now we have a permissive structure where you can, but you're supposed to go through the review first. And you're exactly right about that. In fact, in other cases right now, this particular FCC is clamping down more and more and requiring greater disclosures when it comes to foreign influence over U.S.-based broadcasters. But again, this one seems to be an exception to that rule.
So, and this is something you've never seen in your career, Brendan Carr, the way it was fast-tracked for this George Soros group.
Yeah, the commission itself has never voted to skip this particular process. Now, the other side pointed to a handful of staff-level decisions that they said was very similar. And even if they were similar staff-level decisions, those staff-level decisions aren't votes of the commission. They're not precedential for the commission. So this was a question of first impression for the 5 of us. Do we create a sort of special Soros shortcut, or do we make them run through the normal process? And again, the first time the commission itself voted and said, this one can skip the process.
So does this, and I don't want to introduce any drama here that you don't want to bring upon yourself, but I wonder to what extent you have looked into or are suspicious of some of the motivations of your Democrat colleagues. So, I mean, what relationships do they have such that they would create a Soros shortcut?
Well, I don't think there's anything sort of nefarious per se from that perspective. They're all, really good people. But I do think at the end of the day, it is rather curious. I mean, look, you had Governor Walz doing apparently a fundraiser with Alexander Soros just last week,
yes,
and taking a picture. And then lo and behold, it's the same exact moment that the FCC is finalizing its decision here. Whether something, untoward happened or not, that's just terrible optics. I mean, if you're Alexander Soros, you're going to be sitting on the board of one of these companies that got this special relief. I don't think you should be tweeting out photos like that right now.
So that's a lot of radio stations. Some of these are in very big markets. You talk about some of the hosts who could be upended by this, including our very own Mark Levin, for instance, or Dan Bongino, these nationally syndicated guys. When you look at this, Brendan Carr, from your perspective, how much of a threat is there, do you think, to conservative talk radio in the momentum here?
Look, I think a lot of the conservative talk radio is just like wildly popular right now, not just on terrestrial radio, but on podcasts. And there's certainly a very, very big market for it. I think to your point, Dan Bongino himself has said, no matter what happens with these terrestrial stations, his viewers will still find him. He'll still be popular. I think there's something to that. But look, I don't think that this purchase is being made for the purposes of making money. I wish there was more investment going on right now into local broadcasting. We're seeing the opposite. Maybe the Soros Group sees something in the finances that no one else did, but it seems pretty clear to me that this investment is being made for purposes other than just making money.
All right. Brendan Carr, always appreciate your time and your insights into all these things. Commissioner on the FCC. Sir, good to talk to you today.
Yeah, great to join you. Thanks so much.
It's Brendan Carr. Always get a good perspective on what's going on with that agency now as they sign off on George Soros getting control and his son Alex Soros getting control of over 200 radio stations in the United States. Don't worry, we'll do the review of all that foreign investment later. And they won't even know. You heard Brendan Carr just say right now, I asked him, which foreign interests are they? He said, that's the thing. They don't even have to tell us now. That'll be later in the process. It turns out after the election. Oh, good. Thanks for looking out for the rest of us. Let's see. Phil is calling in from Fredericksburg, line 1. Phil, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, look, when I look at George Soros, I really don't look at George Soros, the man. I look at the Soros organization, and it seems to me like about 10 years ago something happened where somebody took control of this organization, and they started acting like a very aggressive anti-capitalist organization, an anti-freedom organization. The only thing I could think of was that they got taken over by the Communist Chinese Party, and they're getting funded by them. And when we talk about the Soros organization, we have to realize that maybe this is a puppet organization controlled by the Communist Chinese.
I've never gotten the impression that Soros is really looking out for us. Do you get that at all, Phil? That he's on our side?
Soros has a manifest hatred of Western society. He has a manifest hatred of everything Western, and he has tried to destroy it as soon as he became rich enough to do so.
And he's sowed so much chaos. It's funny, through the years, we've every one of us, anybody who's paying attention to American politics, you're wondering, okay, how did things get so crazy? And one of the ways you assess that is, well, which party is responsible for a lot of the craziness? That would be the Democrats. And who's giving them all their money? That would be George Soros. Soros is typically up there with a Tom Steyer figure or a Michael Bloomberg, one of the top donors in the entire country to Democrat causes. And one of the other pieces here, Phil, of course, is that Soros, it's quite obvious, has figured out that sometimes national political giving is not the strategy to achieve his ends. And instead, he's started to buy up local prosecutors' races, for instance, and make it so that they weren't enforcing the laws on the books, instead skipping over them, allowing their communities to become more lawless. And the idea that Soros would be buying up radio stations as a way to foreclose on critiques of Democrat abuses of power, well, that's consistent with his battle rhythm, isn't it, Phil? Because this is the way he operates now. He buys up these small opportunities that are going to pay bigger dividends.
Yeah, I don't understand why he's allowed to give to any parties, because I understood that he was a foreigner, a foreign citizenship person. He doesn't have an American citizenship. I don't know why he can give money to so many Democrat Party candidates all over the country, and we get prosecutors who let criminals go over and over. We got cops busting their hump, and the criminal just gets out. It's just crazy.
It's crazy. I should point out, just as a fact, as a specific fact about George Soros, he's a dual citizen of Hungary and the United States. So that's
okay.
That's what we have going on.
That explains that.
They call him a Hungarian-American businessman. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate the call.
God bless.
All right. Let's see. Sam's calling in from Alexandria, now line 2. Hello, Sam. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, brother, how you doing today?
Good.
Excellent. Yeah, real quickly, I just wanted to make the point, very interesting conversation, as in everything that you do. What I was thinking of is, as the Republican Party in the past, we always talked about First Amendment, and that includes donors and donations and the ability to, do that kind of funding to political candidates, and that there was no restrictions. What I find interesting in this Soros thing is most people would buy commodities, radio stations, and things such as that, for the purpose of making a profit, doing well, those kind of things. What about those that buy it to silence success? In other words, conservative radio. They don't care about the management of the radio station, the making of a profit. They're more concerned with, couldn't care less about losing money, but stripping a population of the ability to hear the diversity of a message.
Well, Soros is just a financial expression of the things that you hear come out of people like Adam Schiff's mouth, which is we need to censor the American people in order to, quote, save democracy. That is the way they operate. And I do want to offer, I think, perhaps a correction. I'm not seeing evidence that George Soros is a full-blown dual citizen. He is a citizen of the United States now, naturalized. He was born in Hungary. That's what I know about it. But either way, the point is, Sam, his money is flowing towards exactly what you're talking about, those types of causes. Create chaos and then silence the people who notice. And even today, I mentioned Adam Schiff. Adam Schiff was tweeting earlier today, or posting to X now, that he is urging all the social media companies to engage in censorship ahead of the election, to stop the, quote, disinformation and misinformation, which is just another way of saying critiques of the Democrat Party, Sam.
Yeah, exactly. And what I find interesting is that we always think about the rich are here. They're rich because they made money and they know how to make money. But in this particular case, you're using your money to strip away information, strip away access to opposing opinions, in hopes that there's a huge block that never gets to hear that opposing view on anything.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden everything's in chaos and people are scratching their heads. Why? Like that dude Charlamagne at the Breakfast Club. He's like, what? Everything's awful now. How come it's awful? And then it takes Byron Donalds sitting there going, Kamala. And they're like, really? He's like, yeah, I brought receipts. He had a whole stack of paper in front of him. He handed it to Charlamagne. Leonard is his real name. Handed it to Leonard. And Leonard it's so funny. I played the audio, but Leonard was just staring at the papers as Byron Donalds was giving all of the details, like an encyclopedia, just going through all of them. And Leonard looked stunned. Like, he's like, I didn't even know this was true.
Yeah, the people that should know don't even know.
That's right. That guy's in the media. Hey, Sam, thank you very much. I appreciate it. By the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, right at the top of the list, national syndicated radio show host Chris Plant. I don't know if any of his stations are in peril right now, but boy, the left is really on the move to go after anybody who dare disagree in public. Hey, speaking of doing things in public, we're going to be heading out to Loudoun County this Friday. Yes, I'm officially announcing it now. Early voting Friday morning, Loudoun County. We had such immense success now 2 Fridays ago in Fairfax County. Last week in Arlington, getting out so many great WMAL listeners, so many voters casting their ballots early in Virginia. And we're doing it again this week, Loudoun County. The place to do that in Loudoun is the Office of Elections in Leesburg. That's on Miller Drive. Friday morning, Corey and I will be once again out there celebrating early voting, getting all those ballots cast. And in their case, they start the day at 8:30 in the morning at that election site. That's 8:30 in the morning this Friday at the Office of Elections in Leesburg. We'll be hanging out. We'll have coffee. We'll have donuts. We'll have a great time. Can't wait to see you out there. If you haven't cast your ballot yet, come on out, Loudoun County. Join us. If you have, come on out anyway and root the people on who are bringing their ballots into the polls. Friday morning, Office of Elections in Leesburg. Don't worry. I'll remind you a bit as the week moves along. We'll be out there. Hey, coming up, Gabriel Noronha talks to us A world in chaos. Iran firing on Israel today. What happens next? Gabriel will tell us moments from now.